Welcome to Shaun and Ricky debrief on the body pump webinar that just happened for the body pump instructors. So yeah, the point of this is to make sure that you got everything you needed to get. And I suppose in some way, Shaun, we need to explain what happened at the start of the webinar.
Absolutely, yeah. It requires an explanation. It's not going to be anything too exciting or interesting or anything that perhaps shouldn't have happened. It's just, complete technical difficulties. So whenever I logged on, I knew Ricky was on, then I thought, right, I'm going to join. Whenever we did it on Monday, we ran through the content. It was great, not a problem. And then it come to doing it tonight, the final show, and unfortunately I couldn't get logged on. Fortunately for me, we were just talking about this, that one of our colleagues was on the call as well, and Ricky sent me a link to the email, and I've seen this email from John, which is going to hopefully get me on that webinar, but Ricky beat him to it and got me on it that way. So the thing I was there vocally, I just wasn't in there visually. So either it's an advantage to that you can hear me and not see me, but now you have to hear me and hear me. So yeah, we just wanted to really, hopefully, just explain a little bit more about some of the concepts of Body Pump 113 webinar, the reasons that we've put certain things in there, and really how you guys can utilize what we hopefully spoke clear enough about that you can then bring into your classes as and when you start to teach them again.
Yeah, so just to give people, for those who were on the webinar, what actually happened at the start. So I don't know if you know this about the start of the webinar, you'll love this, is I knew you weren't going to make it, so I had thought, I'd sent you the link, if he joins, he joins. So I had started to do an intro. So I got as far as the second slide, and I was telling people, I told them what the situation with your technology, and it's like, guys, I'm just going to go with it. If Shaun joins us, he joins us. And I was mid-flow telling them about, the swipe left, swipe right, and then all of a sudden, the whole webinar crashed for me.
Oh no.
So
I don't even know that.
I know. So about 3-4 minutes later, by the time I managed to get back into the webinar, you were there on the phone, and I realized we were live to everyone. So that's why I jumped in at you straight away, and I was like, we're live. Everyone can hear us.
Yeah. We maintain professional, Ricky. That's the key thing, There wasn't anything said. That's important. So yeah, it was safe. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, so guys,
massive shout out to Ricky as well. The technical genius that you are, my man. So yeah.
Yeah. So guys, I guess there's 2 points of this video. Is one, either accept our apology or just laugh at us for what we've been through tonight.
We'll do both. Do both.
Yeah. And then the second kind of more serious point is the biggest take home from that webinar is just about inclusive language throughout. So that's the main thing we want to make sure came across, and you can pop in all your questions down below about the release in general, the webinar itself, or even just some more generic body pump questions.
Yeah, cool. So I think some of the biggest things that came back from you instructors, and perhaps if you're watching this now, you was one of them, was about the way in which there's a real shift in intensity. The more these releases go on from Body Pump 110 to 111, 112, 113 now, we've seen a real acceleration in intensity. So as an instructor, what are we doing to really encourage those changes and encourage those shifts in mindsets towards that particular style of training? Because I'm pretty sure you can all appreciate that you've had some members come up, didn't like that release, I didn't like this move, and it's really about, I suppose, educating them on the importance of those moves. And I always joke that, these moves aren't made up, in Glenn's garage, just chucking weights around. There's a purpose to the movement. There's a real reason behind it. And it's those reasons that we have to transpose to our members. So although, yes, our members perhaps may at this stage not be able to do certain things, what can we do that can coach them inclusively to at least attempt it, or at least feel successful that they've tried it, or they know that that's their next step? And that's what's important.
Yeah, one of the common questions that have come up, not just in 113, 112, at workshops, at webinars, just in general conversation is, what options can we give for the push-ups and mountain climbers, or the jacks as it was in the last one? And my response is always give an option that makes your member feel successful that makes sense. If you haven't seen it on a masterclass or a quarterly workshop, that's fine. You can, use your bank of knowledge in your head to give them. And by all means, ask us for suggestions, ask other instructors just in general. But as long as it keeps people moving and it keeps them feeling successful, and, it kind of makes sense. So don't, doesn't really make sense to give someone the option of doing bicep curls when they're in the tricep track. But again, the argument could be if it keeps them feeling successful. The point is we're using our coach's hat to look at what's going on. And that goes from the language we're using, the options we're giving, and how we're actually physically coaching the track at the same time. Whatever our focus is must land on what's in front of us.
Yeah, sure. So just think about, each track, especially in this release, now that we've got the time to take on board what it is that, I suppose the choreographer is asking us to do, what the notes are asking us to coach, and how we can interpret those, I suppose those moves in a way in which every member finds success. Just think about what can you say at this point or in this move that's going to allow members to get more from it. Of course, we need to bring in layer 2, but never sort of shy away from the education. And yet again, we always have that manipulate intensity in layer 2 as well. We think about, right, how can we make this movement harder? How can we get that member to get more from it? So, there's always that focus on, bringing in that layer 2, bringing in that advanced level of coaching. But sometimes just pull it back a bit and think, what do they need that now is going to be easier? What can we say that's going to allow them to, still be able to do the workout effectively, but perhaps not at the stage in which we've intended it to be put at? Prime example of this is track 7. The lunge track for Body Comp 113. Whenever I first taught this track, for me, I felt it was a real challenge, not just physically, but also as an instructor to coach it. There was an awful lot going on. It's very complex, but obviously the more we do it, the more confident we get, the more we embed that choreography and that movement and muscle memory, the greater we can execute it as an instructor. And that's going to be exactly the same for the participants. So yes, we've got those overhead presses. Yes, we've got that back step and lunge. Do we need to bring that all in at the same time? On the masterclass, yes, they do, because they're coaching for that intensity. But then obviously there's options at the side of those presenters that perhaps are not at that level, or I'm sure they are, but they're perhaps given that option that is the reduced level of intensity. So think about that inclusive language. Shall we try this? If you want to try it, you can. If not, just do what you can. And that way they all have that option to, meet their success or, or get that success that they're paying for.
Yeah, and just maybe to ask you directly, Shaun, here, when you're talking about giving education, we mean it's like you would give education. You might give generic education to do something, but you might give specific education. So to use that track 7 as an example, if you see someone and they're really struggling for whatever reason with the overhead press and the lunge at the same time, as you said, maybe for you, keep it under your chin, and that will help you get intensity. Yeah, so I guess the question I'm asking, is it okay for us all to be given different education for the same track?
Yeah, absolutely. Because yet again, it's really important that we coach to the floor in front of us. And, we know that there's members that are going to be able to take on that challenge, but there's going to be, certainly for me, if we look at, statistically, the demographic that I teach, they're not all at that level. And I know if I was to do that track at the full level of intensity, at the end of it, I'd certainly be knowing that I was working towards my maximum effort. And yes, that's a great outcome, but as an instructor, that's not necessarily something that we always need to demonstrate. Yes, role model weight selection, role model fitness is really important. But, if we're certainly introducing a new release to members and they have those challenges in there, we need to encourage our members to think, yes, this is a great release. Yes, this is a good movement. I know the reasons for it, but at this moment in time, I'm going to take the easier option. And remember, easier option is what people shy away from because it's that word easy. No, it's what's right for them. That's the key thing. What's right for them. A great example of this, at a quarterly workshop, an instructor, I knew that the balance was starting to become off from this instructor. And it was perhaps just because they were new to the movement. Maybe they got back into body pump, whatever the reason was. I connected with that member and I said, just keep your plate here with me. All right. And I left that plate there with me for the 8 reps. It was then on the last 8 reps, I brought the plate up overhead. And if they wanted to come with me on that, they did. And if they didn't, it wasn't a problem. So look at where members are perhaps finding that challenge, where they're finding that struggle, and just dull it down a bit, keep it simple.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's on the head here about the track 7 is what a lot of people will find, A, the first time you do it, and B, the first time you teach it to other people, is balance is the biggest factor in that track. So
Yeah.
it might not even be an intensity factor that you want to start with the plate down here. It might just be from a balance factor, because that obviously makes people, you know, more susceptible to falling. The second thing I was going to ask you, just because of how we entered the webinar, just to chat at the start about the warm-up weight, and I just want to make sure that the points you wanted to make can definitely be made here.
Okay.
So if you want to take that off.
Yeah. So whenever I first started teaching body pump in 2011, 2012, and obviously I know many of you guys perhaps that are watching this later on, you know, you've been teaching a lot longer than me, so you'll really be able to perhaps understand the point of warm up weight and no heavier. You know, this is what you're working with, and these are the reasons why. So yes, we always encourage members to have, you know, perhaps nothing more than a 5 each end of their bar, and that was always set in stone. So this is what you're working with, and you're not going to deviate from that. Whereas now through research and education, we know that every member is going to be different, as our instructors, and it's really important that we pick the right weight that is suitable for us in track one. Yes, track one weight selection does set sort of set the scene for the workout, because we know that if we have, let's say, 5 each side for our warm up track one, and it says 2 to 4 times or 3 to 4 times for track two, we need to be replicating that. We need to be demonstrating that, and it's that consistency that we have to have from track one right through to track 10 that we are doing what's it saying in the notes. So I think that there being said, we need to be mindful what it is we pick on track one, but also, are we perhaps lifting too light or too heavy for track one? The point that I made in this particular, in the webinar, was that muscle fibers work 100%. They do not work at a lower percentage than 100%. So it's all about the amount of muscle fibers that we recruit that is going to determine what weight we can lift. Your muscle cannot see what they're lifting. They can't see if it's 10 kilograms. They can't see if it's 20 kilograms. They don't have eyes, but they can obviously fire up according to what demand you're putting under it. So if we think about muscle fibers as contracting 100%, if we have more effort, more exertion put in, there's more muscle fibers that have to fire, and therefore there's going to be a quicker and bigger emphasis on the warm-up. Yet again, we need to be mindful that we're not lifting too heavy, that it's completely have an adverse effect to what the warm-up should be doing. You know, pulse, you know, elevating the heart rate and secreting that synovial fluid around the joints, encouraging that muscles to be fired. And that's still a really important factor of that, but perhaps we're not lifting enough weight to get the best outcome in that track one. So just being, I suppose, especially at this time, giving yourself that time, if you have the privilege to have equipment at home, to experiment with the weight selection for track one and just see how that feels. Does it change the demand for track one only, or does it, certainly for me, it changed the demand for the whole release? So if you're replicating that, yes, you are going to have, an increase in weight selection and hopefully a really positive outcome for the workout.
Okay. Sorry, mate. Lindsay just needs her charger for the laptop.
It's okay. How are you doing, Lindsay?
Shaun says hi.
Hi.
Just as you were chatting there, something that popped into my mind that maybe more experienced body pump instructors and in fact participants, because I know participants will see this as well. If you think back to like the historic body pump tracks, warm-up tracks, and it's always been accepted the warm-up weight is the lightest weight of the class. 5 each side is probably what you should or shouldn't be doing. But when you think about how even warm-ups have evolved, because we used to have a lot of isolated movements in a warm-up, like an upright row, an overhead press. Yeah. We even used to have bicep curls. Whereas now...
Yeah, where do they go?
I know. Whereas now, because we have all these compound movements where, your body's stronger in a compound movement than it is in an isolated movement. Therefore, it makes sense to give your body just a little bit more load to move, because it's going to get, yes, your body warmed up, but your body warmed up not just like from a muscular point of view, but from a movement point of view. So there's no point in using a really, really light weight for you and going through the motions of a clean and press. We definitely should be able to just feel a little bit of weight in the bar. Just as you rightly said, just enough to switch on, just enough to get the muscle fibers, hello, we're not driving to the gym anymore. We're actually in the workout right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
one question that come up from someone, and I'll give my answer, and you can then give your answer after this, is how do we work out what our warm-up weight should be? And this is both a question and a drill I do myself and get a lot of people to do, is when you're in the gym training, use the body pump warm-up as your warm-up, but do it with a bigger weight than body pump. So for example, you could perhaps do it with an Olympic barbell, which is a lot heavier, which would be 20K, which would be a lot heavier than what you would do in a body pump class probably. So you'll really, really get to feel the difference of movements. And then it's trial and error. So you might try a warm up in your class with 20K, 10K each side, and you might think, that's too heavy. Well, at least next time you can go 7.5 each side, and you kind of just work like that.
Yeah. So pretty similar to Ricky, I think you just have to experiment. And, my advice is, just to, just practice, going heavier, see what it feels like, see if, you found any positives, also see if you found any negatives, what, didn't it do for you? But more importantly, just making sure that you have the opportunity to experiment with weight selection. And I think what the worry for a lot of perhaps members or instructors might be is that if we dictate or choose a weight in track one that sets the stone for the workout. Yes, that's the principle of training. That's the intention. But I suppose whenever you then get to that point where you go, do you know what, today I'm having an off day, I'll just lift 10 for squats, or I'll just lift 9 for squats. That's when you start getting into that mindset where you go, it doesn't really matter. And that's when the workout becomes less effective. And, we see this typically in every single class, and I don't think we will ever change this. Whereas we say, right, now let's double our warm-up weight at least. And we see a 2.5 go on. We never see members necessarily all the time, I suppose, doing what we're asking of them. And that's absolutely fine, because that's how they keep the workout inclusive. That's what they want to do. That's not a problem. But yet again, to really maximize the effects of training, it's just experimenting with the weight and making sure that we have that right weight for us.
Yeah. My little hack, going off at the tangent here, my little hack is, that person who, they can lift heavier, and for whatever reason, which is totally okay for them, aren't lifting heavier. Then I'll flip my whole coaching, and will probably bring it's really easy to do in squats, really so simple to do, where you just bring your whole coaching focus all around timing. So they're definitely getting the intensity from the lighter weight. Because we all know, we all do it. Hello, a 3-in-1 is actually like a 2-in-1, and then I'll just wait at the top for a while. Where a 1-1-2 is, again, a 1 and then straight back up because I want the rest. So that's what I'll do for people who I know can be challenged and are maybe choosing not to lift heavier weights. That's what I'll do for them, just to make sure they're still getting their intensity. Yeah. So when we're talking about, the inclusive coaching, and one of the focuses of this release, you were saying, is about kind of identifying when and how to apply. With this release, when stands out where you need inclusive coaching?
Certainly, I think track 5, track 7, and track 9 are the key ones for me that really stand out. Reason being, we've got the mountain climb, that innovation, that new move, and it is challenging, especially if members aren't used to that. That is where we need to be perhaps aware where we can bring in that inclusivity. Track 7, there's a lot of complexities of that movement, so yet again, just ensuring that we're coaching to the floor in front of us, not giving too much away at once that's not necessarily relevant or purposeful at that particular point. And then obviously track 9, that walk and hover with the spider press up. So what can we do to simplify things and allow everyone to see success, but where there's a particular challenging point of the track that, yes, it may not be complex, it may be quite, quite simple, where people are feeling fatigued, how do we bring that in? How do we bring that inclusive coaching in? Ricky spoke about in the webinar about track 4, a really powerful, basically BT track that, really does a lot of wonders for us. But right at the end, we have those 2 big kickers of wide dead rows, and that there is a great opportunity where we can finish together, as opposed to thinking about just coming close to the end of the workout. And whenever we know there's a particular point in any track that members are going to feel challenge, that struggle, and the likelihood and the percentages of if you feel it, they're going to feel it. And that's where you've just got to be, perhaps, I suppose, considerate of.
Yeah. There was 2 questions. Again, these have just come to me from the webinar with track 7, the lunge track. And I'll throw them both at you. Is the cue nose over toes still an okay cue to use? And what height should the step be?
Yeah. Okay. So nose over toes is absolutely fine, but you've got to remember everybody's body is made up differently, and people are going to have deviation between their hip to their head, from their hip to the heel. There's going to be differences. The key principle is, if that front knee is locked over the ankle, that there's going to give great execution for the movement. It's not going to necessarily deviate the position of the body as such. If we think about the way in which the knee is positioned, if that's locked and it's not going forward, then the head is going to be pretty much where it needs to be. So have more emphasis on focusing on the knee position as opposed to the head. If the eyes are 2 meters in front, that's going to keep the neutral neck alignment. So that's going to protect and really support the back. Yeah, cool. Good shout, Ricky. So you can see there that it's all about the back position and that front knee position as opposed to the actual head itself. So hopefully the green lines on that there will help you out. A point that I did make on the webinar that I'll just repeat was, for us as instructors, but also for our members, just be considerate of what your back foot's doing. So the further back that foot goes, technically the lower depth of that knee needs to become to drive that intensity up. So the bigger the hinge, bigger the distance on the back foot, the bigger the depth through the lunge, which will obviously drive that intensity up. So yeah, again, coming back to that inclusivity, if we need to go shallow, just step back. We can still find success through that row. Yeah, again, that's something that we can work with.
Yeah, and I think with this one, again, as you rightly said, you kind of covered it. It's everyone's going to be slightly different. And what's really useful in this image as well is in regards to step height, just take the risers off, because if there's a lot of risers up there, you won't be able to get into the right position anyway. And somebody even asked, can you do it without the steps and the risers? Of course. Don't interpret that there not being a step there, that it's going to be an easy option all of a sudden. I can tell you now that won't be an easy option at all. You'll still get a load of intensity in that. Yeah. So yeah, I think the key message from this video that Shaun and I are going to chuck in for you guys tonight is, any questions, you can comment them in down below. We are just keen, because of the webinar and our technical issues that happened, that we mightn't have got to go through the questions as we would like at the end. So feel free to pop in any questions down the bottom. Shaun and I'll both be tagged in it, and we'll monitor it over the next few days. And if there's anything you don't want to ask on a public forum, you can ask us privately. And then what we would do is we would put your question and answer out there, but obviously not your name, because if you're thinking it, somebody else is probably thinking it as well.
Yeah.
Cool, mates.
Cool.
Awesome, rats.